Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're going to break down a massive proposed infrastructure project designed to, well, completely unstick the California supply chain. Look, if you remember that severe gridlock that hit our ports a few years ago, the empty store shelves, the skyrocketing inflation, those delayed holiday gifts, then you know exactly how fragile our global logistics network really is. Today, we're looking at a bold, multi-billion-dollar solution that aims to reshape how goods move not just through the state, but across the entire country. It's called the BIG project. And honestly, it's a fascinating shift in how we think about freight.
Okay, so here's our roadmap for understanding the Barstow International Gateway, or BIG. We'll quickly cover the port congestion problem, introducing the BIG project, the port to Barstow route, the impact on the Port of LA, and finally, the backers and the building timeline.
All right, first up, Section 1, the port congestion problem and our major supply chain bottleneck.
We really have to start by looking at the core issue that triggered this whole idea in the first place, right? Ever since the pandemic surge, the ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach have faced intense gridlock. At one point, there were dozens of cargo ships just idling off the coast, waiting weeks just to dock. But why does that actually happen? Well, it isn't just about the sheer number of ships arriving. It's fundamentally about real estate and the incredibly complicated dance of getting cargo off the docks and onto our national highway and rail networks. Think about how we handle containers right now. It requires an unbelievable amount of redundant shuffling. Most international cargo arrives in 40-foot ocean containers. Right now, those boxes are loaded onto heavy-duty trucks, driven through incredibly dense urban traffic into Los Angeles or the Inland Empire, unloaded at a warehouse, sorted, and then repacked into larger 53-foot domestic containers. Only then do they finally head across the country. I mean, shuffling cargo by truck through city traffic just to repackage it, it creates massive congestion and excessive emissions. It's a real bottleneck. Which brings us to Section 2, introducing the BIG project, a $4 billion inland port. $4 billion. That is the massive private investment BNSF Railway is pouring into this facility. What's absolutely wild here is that this represents the very first state-of-the-art master-planned rail facility of this scale developed by a Class 1 railroad in the U.S. And it's entirely privately financed. They are building this to be a true catalyst for a more sustainable freight system.
So the crucial point to understand is that BIG acts as an inland port. Instead of doing all that sorting, transloading, and repackaging in the super crowded, highly expensive real estate of the Los Angeles basin, this project just picks up that chaotic sorting process and moves it entirely away from the coast. It shifts it to a massive 4,500-plus acre site in the high desert of Barstow. Just for a little context, that is literally larger than LAX, and it sits strategically right where the railroad splits to serve both Northern and Southern California. Let's look at what actually goes into a site this massive. By combining rail transfers and transload warehouses directly onto one footprint, it cuts out those middleman truck trips entirely. The cargo doesn't even have to leave the rail yard to be repacked, and crucially, it's designed with the environment front and center. The site includes a 140-acre solar farm that's going to power zero-emission yard trucks and highly mechanized cranes, which drastically reduces the carbon footprint of the whole operation.
Moving right along to Section 3, the port to Barstow routes and its streamlined logistics.
Let's trace how this actually clears up the highways. Under this new model, cargo hops straight onto a train right at the dock. Boom, done. From there, it moves directly into the Alameda Corridor, travels up the BNSF mainline, and arrives in Barstow. So instead of clogging the 710 freeway and local roads with thousands of individual trucks, massive blocks of containers completely bypass the Los Angeles highway system. Once they arrive at BIG, the goods are transloaded into domestic containers entirely on-site.
All right, Section 4, impact on the Port of LA and boosting capacity.
Now, what does this actually mean for the Port of Los Angeles itself? Well, what's really fascinating here is that the port isn't getting physically bigger. It's just getting dramatically faster. Because land at the port is strictly limited, they can't simply build more terminal acres. But by evacuating containers immediately onto trains headed for Barstow, the BIG project increases what we call effective capacity. It allows the port to handle way more overall volume without expanding its physical borders. And official community impact reports absolutely confirm the strategy. They note that reducing terminal dwell times is exactly how the port will handle more cargo and stay competitive with other national ports. It's a simple equation, really. The faster a container leaves the dock, the faster the next ship can be unloaded. However, we do have to look at the localized impacts. We've got to be impartial here.
While regional highway emissions drop significantly across Southern California, local community reports project that Barstow itself will definitely see an increase in activity. The data forecasts nearly 600 localized truck trips per day by the opening year of 2028, and that could potentially rise to over 900 by 2048. So it's a complex balancing act that policy planners are actively evaluating. On one hand, the project promises a massive economic stimulus. We're talking over 11,000 local direct and indirect jobs in the high desert, along with immense regional green benefits by taking trucks off the LA freeways. But on the other hand, local residents are asking very valid questions about construction dust and that daily truck traffic in Barstow. Meanwhile, coastal labor advocates are keeping a close eye on the shift of transloading jobs inland to a facility that's highly mechanized and equipment intensive. And finally, Section 5, backers and the building timeline. Let's look at who is actually pushing this massive project forward. You can see institutional support is remarkably strong. The Port of LA leadership directly cites the velocity and traffic benefits we just discussed. They view this project as absolutely critical to ensuring goods move with speed and reliability to consumers all across the nation. And it is a deeply coordinated effort. Like we mentioned earlier, it's entirely funded by BNSF to the tune of $4 billion, meaning no direct taxpayer funding for the facility itself. But it's heavily backed by both the ports of LA and Long Beach, San Bernardino County supervisors, and state planners. In fact, they've formally integrated the facility into the 2024 California State Rail Plan. They clearly see it as essential to California's freight future. So, what is the timeline for all this to become reality? Well, following a rigorous environmental review and a multi-phase construction period, the facility is eyeing an opening year of 2028. From there, they anticipate a transition period up through an interim year of 2033 as supply chains adapt, eventually scaling up to full horizon year operational growth by 2048. As our supply chains face increasing pressure from both consumer demand and environmental mandates, this project leaves us with a really fascinating thought. If the big project succeeds in easing the massive bottlenecks of Southern California, is moving the port's back end into the desert the permanent blueprint for the future of global logistics? I mean, it completely changes how we think about the geography of trade. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning how the world works behind the scenes.